You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am Dee Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, November 26th, 2021. And boy, Andrew, am I full of food. Buh.
All right.
Buh.
Or at least we assume you'll be full of food.
Well, but hey, don't forget, when we record this is different from when they hear it. Because yesterday was Thanksgiving, right?
Sure it was.
Is it? Shit. Right?
Yes.
Thursday?
No,
Jesus fucking Christ, Andrew. Stay up to fucking task here.
I'm just saying. That's always that joke. And this is actually, weeks like this are actually weird because we often don't even, stick to our normal recording schedule. So who knows what day it actually is?
And I mean, we can guarantee it'll go up on Friday, right? Right. Let's hope so. We've done a Friday every week for
like
7 years. Oh man, where's our award and or money? No. You know what? What we have instead is something better. Friendship. Mm-hmm. But yeah, American Thanksgiving is this week. I hope you're enjoying it if you are celebrating, dear listeners. If not, I hope you had a pleasant and joyful week to the best of your ability in 2021, which is a low bar. Let's talk about being thankful. This is a week of thanks, Andrew. I'm thankful, of course, for you and the show and just our continuing friendship. It's great. It's great. And wow, don't try too hard, Dan. No, but no, it's been making me think about, especially in the wake of 2 years in a row, like 2020 and 2021, the things I am thankful for, and. Honestly, I'm going to go kind of off script here. Like, I feel like in the last 6-7 months, like the things that matter to me the most are just the small things that bring me joy. And I'm honestly drifting away a lot more from like news and like what's new in the nerd world. I'm just like, you know what? I could just play this old video game once again, right? I don't know. That's
someone's playing Metroid again.
Shut up. Shut up. I'm also playing, when I have time, Ghost of Tsushima again, rewatching old movies that I love. It might also just be the time of reflection that comes with this point of the year, where, family, friends, and celebration sit on the mind, whether you can see them or cannot. So yeah, how have you been thinking about celebrating this time of thanks and gift giving, Andrew? Any sort of insights from you, or are you just kind of like just surviving?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of that. There's definitely just kind of finding comfort in the things that you can.
Right.
We've been doing, pandemic casts, for almost 2 years now, a year and a half to almost 2. And things are obviously different now. A lot of people are vaccinated. To a certain extent, things are starting to look a little bit more like normal,
right.
Although not quite, right? I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast, I go to work, right? Mm-hmm. I go to work again. But it's different, right? We have masks. We're all vaccinated, and we still. The thing is we now do stuff differently, right? Like we suddenly the idea of doing a virtual meeting is actually the norm. And an in-person meeting is like the weirdness, right?
Right. It makes everybody nervous.
So no, but I'm kind of. It's nice to know that there's a little bit of some normalcy, even though everything is kind of in chaos. And although there's some things I will say I feel like are never going to get back to normal, and to a certain extent this is where I almost wish I could bring friend of the show Taylor on, because boy oh boy does he have some strong opinions about movie theaters. But he's not here, and I don't want to steal his thunder. luckily, a famous film producer and director decided to also have a problem. And let's just say, not be as thankful as maybe we were trying to be.
So you must be talking about Steven Spielberg when he disparaged Netflix movies for being nominated for Oscars.
No.
So you're probably talking about Martin Scorsese for being upset about filming on digital and, again, streaming movie services?
No.
You must be talking about, I don't know, who... Uwe Boll probably said something shitty?
Well, I mean...
Obviously. I mean, of course, Dan, come on.
No, so for me, the big news is, noted filmmaker Ridley Scott, known for a variety of films, including but not limited to...
Alien.
Alien, Gladiator.
Blade Runner,
Kingdom of Heaven. A few other things. He actually has 2 movies coming out. This one already came out, and another one's coming out, I believe, like this week or so.
Right.
The Last Duel and House of Gucci.
I didn't know he was directing. Hold on.
He's involved with House of Gucci.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that he was involved with House of Gucci. That's hilarious. Okay. I've seen the trailers. I didn't realize... No, not the trailers, but I've seen commercials and stuff. I didn't realize, wow, that was a Ridley Scott
he's the director.
Joint. Oh, wow.
So the Last Duel came out like a week or 2 ago.
No idea.
And it's funny. He's now gotten a lot of notoriety because of some things he said about it. So, for example, or perhaps it's a theatrical exclusive, right? It's a movie that's only in theaters.
A historical drama based on a 14th century duel about accusations of rape between knights, because that's who have duels back then. Not the most uplifting of cinematic fare, which is actually common for Ridley Scott. He doesn't direct happy movies by any means. But yeah, it's a historical drama, probably very long, if I know Ridley Scott, and then probably involves some sort of creation of the universe kind of stuff. If I've seen Prometheus, I'm sure it's connected somehow. He's trying to connect everything, right? It's all.
All of his movies are in one shared universe,
right? The name of the French king in the movie is like Weyland-Yutani,
Yeah. But so apparently the movie is, I believe the verb I've seen used, cratering. Which apparently is when you go a step beyond bomb and you just leave nothing but crater.
In fairness, it's getting good critical reviews at the very least, and it seems like viewer reviews as well. But that being said, plenty of movies that might be good, whatever, don't do well at the box office. But in terms of filmmakers, it's interesting to see in a pandemic. I want to say post-pandemic, but we're not quite there yet. But in a pandemic world, when movies don't do well, to people like you and I, Andrew, we're like, duh, because, and I gesture to the outside, right?
Right.
But people get butthurt, like, not to like just pile on Ridley Scott, and I don't mean to throw any blame on anybody, but like, I think one of the most high-profile kind of stories revolving around poor performance in theaters was between Scarlett Johansson and Disney with the performance of Black Widow,
right? And
all the sort of the topics that brought up. But like, we've seen that kind of stuff ebb and flow with the huge success of Shang-Chi, right? It actually did very well in theaters. But now we have The Last Duel, cratering, as you quoted, which I'm guessing again means not doing very well.
Right. So good comparison to bring up Black Widow. Black Widow, which was released in theaters in July of 2021, so only a few months ago. Wow, actually, only 5 months ago.
Yeah. Only a few months into like vaccination stuff as well.
But also simultaneously released on Disney Positive.
For $30?
For $30 at the time. So that movie came out, and its domestic gross was $183 million.
Not the worst.
International was 195, so a total of about almost 400,000.
Yeah.
Not clearly not what they wanted, right?
Right. By Marvel standards, that's very poorly performed.
That's a poor performance.
Oh man.
Contrast with The Last Duel, which released in theaters October 15th, so a month ago.
It's been a while. Yeah.
I think it's probably out of theaters at this point, right?
So at least
domestic
80
gross,
million? 100 million?
10 million.
Oh.
And international of 16. So about almost a couple million shy of 30 million.
Can we look up the budget?
I heard it was 100 million, but I can't... I don't know because that's
what I'm saying. Yeah.
I don't know if that information is even accurate anymore, right? Like,
right. What is budgets?
So yeah, this movie's not doing well, and it's just funny because Ridley Scott's really upset. And in an interview recently, he I'll tell you, I heard about this because it blew up Twitter. My nerd Twitter was basically everyone just shitting on Ridley Scott because Ridley Scott basically says the problem is millennials ruined it, right? Millennials and their phones are the reason why this movie didn't do well. And boy, oh boy, it's not every day you see someone just capture Old Man Yells at Cloud in such a perfect way. Because I mean, first of all, he's saying millennials, they want everything on their phone. They don't, they can't go to theaters. Millennials are almost 40. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, yes, millennials certainly have phones, but so does grandma. Everyone's got a fucking phone, right?
Right. For context, dear listeners, if you're not one of them, both Andrew and I are either just below or just above the cutoff for being a millennial.
Right. It is so this idea, and of course he says this, though, millennials with their phones. It does sound like old man complains about kids, Right. But again, these millennials that are, I don't know, seeing their doctor for their first prostate exam, or millennials who,
That reminds me, I should schedule it.
Or these millennials who have kids in high school, that's it's just such a weird thing to take a stance on, and to also just like disregard everything else,
the world?
To be like, oh no, clearly the problem is these fucking millennials and their cell phones,
right?
And he says some really like clearly he has feelings about this,
right? From what I saw, he said this on a podcast interview with Mark Maron on the very popular comedy podcast WTF. So where if you don't know, if you haven't heard the show, Mark Maron is a comedian who's become a very successful podcaster who's actually really good at interviews and getting people to kind of be very, very candid on his show. It's not just like a normal seat on a press junket, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so, like, what I mean by that is that if I haven't listened to the podcast in years, but what we're getting, that quote from Ridley Scott is probably very genuine, very earnest, and very, very much what he actually believes. And so it's not just he's so pissed off because he's riled up in a moment. I would bet it's like it's a result of a long conversation that he was having with someone else, which is interesting. But honestly, I think the only angle of truth I can give that is that a lot of millennials, being a very large group of people straddling a very large age range, are kind of commanding a lot of, the spending economy now, right? But the thing is, it's not millennials, is that since there's so many of them / us, their behavior economically is probably evocative of what the general economy is feeling and doing. And what that is that people aren't really going to the movies. Not because they prefer their phones.
Right. Uh-huh. Well, and and one of the things I saw some articles or some people discuss this, and one of the things I did see is, hey, most of the people that go to theaters are like in their 20s,
not millennials,
and 30s, right? That's the biggest demographic. Which, and even if you say young people, what he's saying is that people that go to movie theaters didn't go to his movie. It's really what he's saying, because they clearly went to other movies, right?
Right.
Someone was buying tickets to Shang-Chi and to
so maybe young people
Eternals and to Dune
aren't really in, whether they like their phones or not, whether they subscribe to TikTok or not, whether they like Marvel movies or not. Maybe they're just not really into a movie about a 14th century civil dispute about rape.
Right. Which and to no disrespect to Ridley Scott, it's probably a fine film.
Yeah.
But it's
read the room,
really
dude. Yeah.
Does not come across. I mean, so one thing I've also seen people talk about is the marketing for this movie. When I originally messaged you about this, I was like, I hadn't even heard of this fucking movie, and it's already like out of theaters basically. And it's interesting because in at least one interview he said, "Oh no, the marketing was fine." It's like, I don't
Clearly.
think so. If you have a movie with Matt Damon, Adam Driver, and Ben Affleck, and no one's heard of it, you know, maybe the marketing wasn't fine, you know?
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if there's anybody you can point a finger at, it is marketing, not millennials. I mean, if anything, you should maybe have hired more millennials or Generation Z or whatever you want to call the generation after the millennial generation. Hire them to market your movie, because if you want them to that demographic to show up, then, well, one, make a, like I said, read the room. No one wants to see a movie that depressing in theaters right now. That's probably super long, but also, like, I'm guessing maybe his marketing people are around his age or a little bit younger. So, like, it is the marketing's fault, honestly.
I mean, it does.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, marketing is, I think, the number one thing that he's really, in that, you know, having like a fucking downer Ridley Scott movie in winter, or in, you know, late autumn, early winter of a pandemic, it's maybe also like just bad timing. You can't control that. But I mean, one of the things I was actually curious about is, you know, he says that, like, hey, these damn millennials. But I think I remember, like, Dune came out a month before this movie,
Right.
and it simultaneously released on HBO Max.
Correct.
And it did about $370 million, right?
Thousand. Oh wow.
Yeah, it cratered. No, I mean, Dune, which is not like that's also like a. I mean,
Yeah.
That's not like a hot action movie. It's fucking Dune. You know, it's 2.5 hours.
It's half of Dune.
Sand. Yeah, it's
Totally.
half of Dune.
Right.
Right. And it seemed to do okay.
Yeah.
So it is. I find it really strange because it is. It does. It kind of is. You joked about it earlier with Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese, and I know Ridley Scott's also had something where he blasted Marvel movies, you know, saying they're all shit or boring or whatever. And there is this feeling of you know, there's, you know, even when you are a legend in your field and you're an expert. It feels like there comes a point where, for whatever reason, your expertise is no longer topical or no, I don't want to say relevant. He's not irrelevant.
No.
But like the movie he's making, the way he makes it, for the money he spends, maybe that's just not what a lot of people are looking for as much.
Right. Or I think the way I'm thinking about it is, and I hate to bring up a word that is so kind of has too much cultural weight, but the word that comes to mind for me with regard to that type of filmmaker or creator is entitlement. He's like, I'm Ridley Scott. Any movie I release should be doing gangbusters. That's kind of how it feels.
Yeah.
Especially because of how petty his argument is, right? And for a guy that's kind of renowned for being smart, he's being a thoughtful filmmaker, a very creative filmmaker, a very visionary filmmaker, even in his older age. Like he had a movie, not a movie, he had a TV show. God, was it for Netflix or HBO? It was like a weird sci-fi thing, like In the Company of Wolves or something like that. That actually was well regarded. And again, like we said, The Last Duel has been well regarded critically, but like, he reminds me a lot of well, he kind of comes from auteur stock in the sense that like he made these really kind of weird movies that just kind of happened to click because of the context, you know, the kairos of it. He was taking advantage of the situation or becoming successful or getting success on a monetary level for being in the right place at the right time. And you can't maintain that forever.
Right.
And the part of aging gracefully is to not just say, hey, I'm famous and an auteur, therefore I should always do well. It should be knowing when to shut the fuck up and just keep doing what you're doing. Because if he hadn't done this, like, yeah, it didn't make money, at least as much money as he wanted, but with the critical reaction I'm seeing, like, it wouldn't have damaged his career as much as him going like, fucking millennials is damaging his career, right?
Right. Yeah, no, and I think that's, he's now, at least for a while, is going to be remembered as
I think so.
Crazy old man that yells at millennials.
Well, there's going to be a lot of people, but this is the first time they've heard of him, and it's in this context, not because they saw the movie, but because he's the guy that blames millennials for his bad movies, even though the movies aren't bad, right?
Well, I think what's interesting to me is. I bet you there's a lot of people that know his movies, but maybe just never really... Right, like you can see a bunch of movies and not think about who the director is, right?
Right.
Not everyone tracks directors. Not everyone thinks about that. So imagine someone who's maybe a millennial who really liked Alien. And Alien's a good example because Alien's... different director. Alien 3, different director. Right. And so, like, you could like a whole series of movies, not realizing that one of them was done by this director.
Right.
Maybe these saw some other movies, but you never really connected Ridley Scott, and now you find out, this guy thinks I'm a dipshit millennial because I have a cell phone.
Yeah.
And it does really sound like it's like they're so used to they only want to learn something if it comes from their phone, which again really weird thing to say. Because honestly, that's also comes across as like he thinks his movie's a fucking educational film,
right?
Like, okay, then it should be on PBS, dude.
Did he direct Alexander? Who directed Alexander?
I don't think he did that. I mean, he did Gladiator.
Yeah, that movie was fine. That movie was fun.
It's fine. Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
It's not historical.
It's not. Yeah, it's not historical. No. Alexander was Oliver Stone, of course.
Oh, even better. Better.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just like this guy who's like, I make this movie and it has to be good.
Right.
And I just think it is interesting, because every time a notable older filmmaker kind of throws this, like, you should like my stuff because it's good because I made it. I'm just like, maybe you just got lucky,
Right. And I tend to like Ridley Scott movies. I don't necessarily seek him out because it's directed by Ridley Scott. I haven't seen every movie that he's made, but like if I see a movie and it seems to be kind of up my alley, I'm like, and Ridley Scott directed it? That's really fucking cool. I'm gonna go see that. This actually probably kind of harms he's kind of a dick, right? And that's part of there's a larger conversation there, especially for me, like as a guy that plays like guitar, which means I'm into old music. Lot of people that became famous in the 70s and 80s and 90s who are revealing themselves to be true dipshits right now. And it's really disheartening. I think of actually, in contrast, he hasn't released a movie recently, but I think of someone like George Miller, the director of Mad Max Fury Road.
Mad Max, right.
And, of course, Happy Feet and Happy Feet 2 and Babe, Pig in the City.
Boy, I just forget that that's the same guy.
That's the thing, though. That's why I that's the explicit reference is like he makes movies that, just like Ridley Scott, he makes movies on a whim. He makes movies because he's like, this is a story I want to tell. It's going to be weird. It's going to be unique, and there's going to be no other movies out in the theaters that are anything like this. But George, if it doesn't do well, he doesn't. From what I've seen, George Miller hasn't been like, fuck everybody, that movie was brilliant. He's like, oh well, I'll do another one, right? If anything, if you look at the trajectory of his career, going from the Mad Max movies to Happy Feet back to Mad Max, and among others, even though he goes one's very much a children's movie and then hardcore action movie, I still think that's a progression of things
Happy
getting.
Feet is not a hardcore action movie.
No, not yet. But despite that, if you look at the progression, chronologically, I feel like the movies from Mad Max 1 to Fury Road, they're just getting progressively weirder, including the Happy Feet movies, right? And there's the adage of letting the work speak for itself, and I feel like Ridley Scott used to be like that, but then he realized that he decided he was capital R, capital S Ridley Scott, and I feel like there's kind of been a progression ever since Prometheus came out. A movie I was going to
actually mention Prometheus was one where, because that's the one that if I remember you told me about how there's this whole religious Jesus sub story, or not sub story, but this narrative that I mean, I saw that movie and I would not have thought that.
Yeah.
But then I read like, oh, what the and it was that kind of thing where, oh, my movie is so fucking deep, you just didn't get it, right?
Right.
And that was a combination of writer and director, I think, right?
Oh yeah, your boy was one of the writers on that. And then he doubled down that with the follow-up movie, which was an Alien movie. We actually had an episode about that. Taylor was on. I forgot what that movie was called because I did not care for it. There's a lot of Michael Fassbender in it.
Covenant, Alien Covenant.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Which, leading into kind of like the religious angle as well. Like at some point, Ridley Scott, like I said, became capital R, capital S Ridley Scott, and everything he does is important. Which is, it's what we could look at him as being as a cautionary tale. Instead of ridiculing him, it's like, oh, this is what happens when we, and we've talked about this before, kind of giving too much praise to auteurs. They can do great stuff, but like, don't forget that movies are made, video games are made, TV shows are made, not only because of the mind behind it, but also the team they work with. We saw this also with Joss Whedon. Mm-hmm. He wasn't railing against millennials, but he was revealed to be an asshole when he got power. Honestly, right? Mm-hmm. And kill your idols. That's the adage, right? But like, it's sad. Although I will tell you one thing, reading about The Last Duel, Andrew, I can almost guarantee that you will watch it at some point.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Because it's been favorably compared to Akira Kurosawa's film, Rashomon. Yeah, and Andrew's on board. He's like, heck yes.
Well,
look, one of the writers is John Rogers. No, it's joking.
No, actually, no. Actually, I need to make a joke about that because John Rogers does have a movie coming out.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of someone who doesn't let himself become, too associated with.
Well, he's young.
He's not that young.
He's still young compared to Ridley Scott. He's right. Ridley Scott's like 804. Excuse me.
The new movie "Marry Me" that's coming out next year with Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson. I don't even know what it's about. But it's basically like a rom-com written by John Rogers.
Nice.
Or screenplay by John Rogers. So the reason I mention it is because this is a guy that, did everything from Jackie Chan Adventures to the Catwoman movie to Transformers.
Thank you.
To a rom-com to Leverage to The Librarians, right? There is something about just making the move, doing the job that's there, and being kind of diverse and never, get too high on your own supply, which is kind of not quite the what I want to say, but like I think Ridley Scott's one of those guys, who thinks he's, like you said, capital R, capital S Ridley Scott, and that's the kind of thing where,
and Not to get too deep into like cultural criticism here, but like I think it's interesting, going back to the previous names I mentioned, how it seems to be people from a certain generation, of not like movie movements, but perhaps even like generations people were born into, like the boomers, right? We got Steven Spielberg, we got Scorsese, we got Ridley Scott. How people who are also on the forefront of revolutionary cinema, they changed the game, like George Lucas. Like part of the thing they talk about with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, like they brought basically indie aesthetics and indie creativity to AAA movie making. They broke down, almost literally broke down the previous studio system that existed, and kind of made it a free for all, changing the landscape completely. And now that they're the stalwarts, they're the old guard. Seeing them act like the very oppressors that they were fighting against, for lack of a better word, is really disheartening. And
well, what do we have to go to all the classic nerd quotes? You either die a hero or you
live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah.
So George Miller, watch out, buddy. Mad Max,
like,
Mad Max Insurrection.
But it is. It's such a God, I'm gonna watch The Last Duel in like 6 months on like Netflix or something.
And guess what? You're gonna be like, it's awesome.
Be all right. Well, it's 2.5 hours long. Though.
It's a very long. Well, yeah. I was
Ridley
gonna
Scott.
bring up
that it's like that guy can't make a movie that's not like the director's cut's probably like fucking 12 hours long. And
right.
Mr. Director, you got to cut that down to something you could see in a movie theater.
Unless it's like the Alien director's cut that Ridley Scott had, which is actually shorter than the theatrical cut. I was gonna bring up the runtime, but Dune is just as long. So like I think it goes we talked about this already, but like it speaks to, and this is something that is the realm for historians, not pop culture critics like ourselves, because we're reading things in real time, but there are ongoing theories about entertainment reflecting the culture that it was built in, right? That it was created in. New historicism is what the literary theory is called. Going like, what kind of entertainment do people want during a pandemic versus what entertainment do people want during wartime? What kind of entertainment do people want during times of peace and prosperity? And it differs. And I'm not saying this is an evidence of it. It's like climate change, right? It's not one bad day of weather. It's stepping back and looking at the overall movement. But I would be pretty safe to say. We can actually see this, like seeing, medieval, which is tainted by whether this is the right time period or not. I actually don't have those times on the top of my head, those dates on the top of my head of like, the plague and just short lifespans in general. We don't want to see that and spend 3 hours in a movie theater with masks on, with people we don't know, while we don't know if people are vaccinated or not. We don't want to spend that time watching a movie about that in that kind of context. We don't want to watch apparently a TV show like Why the Last Man about a pandemic killing off half of the population, right? Sweet Tooth on Netflix, I think, only survived because they changed the tone of the comic from being completely existentially dreadful to being a fairy tale. And I think we're seeing kind of a pattern. I'll check back when we have an episode in 15 years, when we can look back on this time and actually analyze the kind of entertainment that is actually soaking into culture right now. But I think we're still too close to it. But I think taking a quick look around, I honestly wonder if marketing could have saved this movie, because it just doesn't seem like the right kind of thing. Right? But Dune apparently is. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
And I think it is a legitimate thing. I was actually thinking about this a few weeks ago when a friend of mine, I have a friend who watches the Wachowski film V for Vendetta, based on the graphic novel illustrated by some guy. Sorry, I just love that. But yeah, V for Vendetta every year, and that's a movie that came out in the mid 2000s or early 2000s, right. And had a theme and a feel to it, and right. And is that a movie that, if something like that came out now, how would it even resonate?
Right.
I thought I would try watching it sometime, and I actually just, the one line that everyone's quoting right now is, if you found out that your own government was responsible for the death of 100,000 people, would you really want to know? And it's like, oh, just 100,000?
Yeah, I think we did watch that, or at least I watched it right after a certain election in 2016, and we talked about it on the show.
Yeah,
that was a mistake. But yeah.
Anyway,
newsflash: "Marry Me" is based on a webcomic.
Oh,
so look at that! Look at that!
Well, that now clearly illustrates the John Rogers connection.
Right. Oh, Bobby Crosby. Yeah, okay. Good for him. That's cool. And he got John Rogers to write it. That's dope.
Well, ever since Catwoman, he's really been trying to dig himself out of that hole.
Hey, fair enough. Good for him.
And then Transformers, the movie that never made money, so they never paid the writers royalties.
No, yeah, that movie is, talk about cratering.
Talk about cratering.
Gosh, yeah, if things had gone different, they could have had 6 sequels.
I know.
Or whatever. R.I.P. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on other social media where you can find us at our respective handles, such as Twitter, where you can find Andrew at ProfoundDark, and you can find me at dbethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at ProfoundBrick, and me and my work at dbethelcomics.
Well, you're at our website at forallintents.net. You can also take a look at our YouTube page by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube.
We use two tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4, and they're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 by attribution license. Actually, who knows? It could be 5.0 now. I haven't checked recently.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like the Apple Podcast app or Spotify. But what would help us out even more would be to go to their storefronts and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. So, not to bring it back to what we're talking about. The Last Duel, $100 million budget, right?
That's what I've read.
Approximately. Yeah. What did the, like, 42 million?
It's 27 million as of today.
Domestic, I'm guessing? Yeah.
No, that's total.
That's total? Oh, damn.
Yeah, no, the domestic was like 10 million.
Gotcha. But
cratering, damn.
But well reviewed generally. Not to use Rotten Tomato, but I think they have it somewhere. Metacritic hovering around the 80s percentage kind of thing. Now going back to talking about like movies that people want, released the same week, October 15th. Halloween Kills. Budget of $20 million. Box office right now at $131.6 million. I don't know. And oh yeah, aggregate review score right now is hovering at 41%. So how about we say this? Movies might be broken.
Well, and it's there's probably, you know, I think there's something we should think about for the future is this idea that what we go to the movie theater to see is different.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. What gets you to leave the house during a pandemic to go see a movie, right?
Right. Or even, and maybe even, you know, going forward, right? The idea of seeing perhaps very long, dreary show about killing and rape. Maybe that's not what people want to go to a movie theater to see. You know, spend $20 on a ticket, get a $32 bucket of popcorn and a $57 soda. Right. Maybe
but a much shorter movie just about killing at 105 minutes.
A plus.
A plus.
A plus.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm glad Shang-Chi did well. That's all that matters to me.
Yeah.
You know. And hey, I guess we could bring that in. We have both now seen Shang-Chi. And
that's for another time because
I'll just get off my chest right now. It's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
It was a good movie. It's fun times. Dragon.
Kung Fu. Or I guess martial arts. I shouldn't say Kung Fu.
Jesus, Andrew. How?
There's a really great thread on Twitter. When we talk about Shang-Chi in the future, if we do, I'll mention it again. But there's a really great thread on Twitter of a person who basically analyzes kind of just the Chinese aspects of the film.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the bus.
Oh, there's the bus one too. No, there's one where it's just talking about some of the actual Chinese and martial arts stuff. It's actually really a lot of these are really great.
I'll try to put
that's for another time.
I'll put a link in the show. I'll put a link in the show notes to a bus driver, a Muni driver analyzes the bus fight scene, and it's glorious. So, until you feel comfortable seeing movies in the theaters, dear millennials,
or getting into a fight on a bus.
Either way. Actually, don't get in a fight on a bus. Please don't. The world's very volatile right now. And you don't know what people are thinking or doing or holding. So just be nice. Be nice. So until you're nice to someone else, and hopefully someone's nice to you, and until you feel comfortable going to see a movie in a theater, dear listeners, I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. Also, and what's bizarre is that millennials are like what? Technically 30, like late 30, almost 40. Like
right. Technically, I think depending on what you look at, we could be considered millennials. Yeah.
So it's like
I'm getting my prostate checked.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, millennials are people that are at the cusp of getting their prostate checked.
Let's make this a quick one. Let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
Got a little burp there.